are going to top the billing this week with what we believe is the biggest and most consequential match of the weekend coming, and now there's
perhaps the whole November series.
Yeah,
in terms of actual, I think. Well, I mean, there's nothing tangible necessarily, but I think it's a huge game, and I think if you see the game is Italy v Georgia in Florence this Saturday,
to keep that suspense going for as long as possible.
But I mean, in terms of that, that game, if Georgia win it, could be the window shattering moment for Georgia.
It's certainly.
I think it's certainly.
Well, it's one of those games that both sides have an opportunity to make a statement, and the statement is very, very palpable and so tangible and timely. Because, like, as much as England, New Zealand, huge, worth so much revenue as well, and it's like undeniably a massive game. I think Wales, Australia, also a fantastic, massive game. Ireland, Argentina, lots of history to it, but none of them have quite the impact, even though it's at a lower level of play, if it's closer to the tier 2, as this kind of contest. It's something we've been building on this podcast before, just this rivalry, because we're very much we're in Georgia's corner. Like, it's one of the few countries in the world that it is actually the national sport, and it's only for the lack of the massive potential for economic growth that World Rugby seems to be kind of shoving them under the rug,
and desperately hoping for the US to become
deadly at rugby. Which, like, I'd love that too, but one doesn't preclude the other, and Georgia have actually been committing to rugby for years, and they do actually have a few notches on their belt. Like, Ireland, probably there was a warning shot fired to us before the rest of the tier 1 kind of sides realised, when we had that shocking World Cup in 2007 that featured a very nearly loss to Georgia. But in more recent times, like last year, we had the Wales game that they really should have won, which is kind of forgotten now, which was what
should have drawn.
It was drawn. Sorry, it was 13-6. But Mr. P. Try should have been making an appearance
in the last phase. That's true,
because there was 10 minutes of scrumming on the line. But they're dangerous.
In terms of the November series, like, you can talk about your England games, you can talk about your Australia games or whatever. It's a bit like, at the end of the Premier League season in the football, if like Arsenal are playing Man United and Liverpool are playing Chelsea or whatever, but the league's already decided. It's like, they're big games, pretty teams, but actually it's the game at the bottom of the table where the teams are scrapping for their lives and looking to get up and be one of those top teams and stay in the top tier. Those are the games that are often more compelling, and that in a lot of ways is what this is. I think this is for both sides. They're them trying to stamp their foot down and say, hey, we want into tier 1, we are a tier 1 team, we want to be a tier 1 team for both sides. Because right now obviously Italy do have the Six Nations berth, but world rankings wise they're not in that top tier. And Georgia obviously are on the periphery in that trifecta of Japan, Fiji and them, who are just between tiers, I guess. Tier
and
1
there's Romania there as well.
No, tier 2.
They've kind of gone backwards, but they did win the rugby, the European, was it the rugby?
Romania?
Yeah, they won it last year, the year before.
No, they didn't.
Did they not?
No. Georgia have won them all, but Georgia got beaten by Romania one year, but then Spain beat Romania. And this year Georgia did do a Grand Slam.
Right, yes, they did this year. No, that's quite. They're at the forefront of mind. They had a bad summer of it out in Japan against pacey teams.
They did,
who spread them around. And like, I remember a couple of years ago, they struggled in Argentina as well when they were playing them a couple of years ago on their Americas tour. And it was just that by the end of the tour, they couldn't keep up.
Well, to be fair, they actually did put it up to Argentina.
They did for a little while, but it was just like fatigue towards the end, because they have a style of play that like is not actually dissimilar to Schmidt ball, if you like, what Ireland do, but it's like it's a bit less hurried. Even like there's even less urgency and more willingness to go through phase after phase, and more willing to just play off 9 almost exclusively for periods of the game. They're very interesting to watch actually, because like they're one of the few teams that slow the game right down with ball in hand deliberately, and
they manage the pace of a
game.
And especially you see it work at Nations League or whatever they call it these days, the Division 2 Six Nations Championship. You watch them just very calmly and serenely against like excited teams like the Spanish. They just slow the game, they can grind a game to a halt and just scrum. I've seen them have a scrum on the halfway line, demolish the scrum, win a penalty, take another scrum and do it again and do it again and do it again, and minutes chalk off the clock. And that is a huge key to, like, if you think of 10-man rugby traditionally, it's closer to 8-man rugby or 9-man rugby, obviously with the young scrum half Labanidze, I think it's pronounced, but you think of 10-man rugby as, you know, you have your forwards, they're winning battles, and then you're doing a lot of kicking. But with Georgia, it's not really that kind of thing. They like to hold the ball. They like to control the pace. Like, they don't like to be on the back foot. They don't like to be the team reacting to things.
No, but
they get
like
tired when they get tired when they defend, especially against, like, you noticed it this
teams,
summer against Fiji and Japan, teams who move the ball creatively.
Yeah, that's probably where they fall off, because when you watch when them working their way through that tournament against the tier 2 teams, they're very happy without the ball as well, and like their roving centre pairing chop down any kind of behind the gain line inaccurate passing that they kind of get confronted with. That does tend to fall apart when they lean on it a little, kicking the ball away aimlessly when they're a little tired or something, and not being able to react.
Yeah, when they're big, their big thing that Georgia lean on, and the big reason why they stake a claim as to being a tier 1 team, is they do have an elite pack, and they do have a pack of, not necessarily even, they have an elite scrum and probably somewhere close to an elite maul, and then the rest of their pack for a tier 2 team are playing professional rugby, be it in France or be it in England. It's mostly in France, it's also in England. There's a couple of players playing for Krasny-Yar in Russia, there's a couple of players, but they're all playing professional rugby.
What is it, the Lelos Saracens?
That's not professional rugby.
No, it's
that's
not.
a little bit behind.
But that's their domestic rugby.
But those are the backline players. There's no players in their pack who aren't playing professional rugby.
Yeah, that's true.
So they're obviously at a big level, and they're obviously all big guys. And what they need to do, especially without the ball, is use that physicality, impose themselves on the opposition, and then slow the game down. Because what happened against Fiji, they had scrum issues, which is not like
That's
them.
Unusual,
and then against Japan as well, is when the ball gets quick against them, they do tire. They're not used to it. They're slow to get around the corner.
They're scrambled. They're not very instinctive scramblers either. Once the line's broken, it's kind of broken,
and even with a couple of rucks, as long as the ball's quick, you can catch pillars being slow, a bit like the French. You can catch them just failing to get around the corner, and that's obviously a massive concern for Georgia. So plan A for Georgia, the plan B is rugby as hell, but plan A is to stop them at source, slow the ball,
just dominate the source of it,
and win those physical battles in the tight, and that's absolutely massive for them, and that's going to be a huge part of the plan going into this Italy game. The game is going to be played in Florence, which I haven't seen before. It's a stadium called Stadio Artemio Franchi, I think would Franchi, I'd say.
Okay.
And then its capacity is about 43,000, and the weather, mercifully enough, is to be nice. Rugby conditions, 20 degrees,
which will arguably suit Italy more, because the brand that Conor O'Shea's kind of brought in the last couple of years, and he is kind of developing depth slowly but surely with a lot of the young players, is a lot of attacking backs, and it's like, even though you see a lot of rainy games in Treviso, and so in their domestic leagues they can get very stickly and awful, what is growing across the board even in their lower levels is that players seem to recognise a little bit more just competency, ball in hand, in executing.
Huge.
And it's like identifying space, executing 2-on-1s. That's starting to happen now, and they're grabbing some tries as a result of it, and they're nearly getting some results. And it's like, it's a simple game when you do that, but for the longest time there was no evidence of that at either domestic or national level, and that's kind of what's led them to be in a position where this game's as important as it is. Had they been spending the last few years after this steady development kind of nicking 1 or 2 results per Six Nations, and even getting wooden spoon but then trading off every now and then, which had been the case when Scotland were in a Hames, that they were both kind of trading wooden spoons, and it was never an issue of like relegation or anything. It was just these are the bottom teams and the other teams are the top teams. But now it's kind of the gap's becoming more pronounced, and although they are developing, it's nowhere near the same rate.
It's not that's huge. They do, like, at the risk of being harsh here, because I do think they are moving forward. They do get they get a lot of undue credit for any kind of improvement. The Italians, where, you know, when they actually entered the Six Nations, they were not necessarily the worst team in it, especially when you look at other teams. And like, they did go a couple of years without winning wooden spoons. They got in on merit, and then they have stalled.
They've disimproved.
And now, as they do have their 2 franchises, they are pumping money into them. They've always had a bit of money to pump around, but in terms of they're developing because they're in this league with a bunch of other teams who are developing quicker than them, and it's just natural for them to move up a bit. But Scotland certainly have blown them out of the water in that regard
in the most recent years, yes.
And there's no sense of any of the other Celtic nations, Wales or Ireland, giving them any kind of we saw the spectacle at Soldier Field at the weekend.
great to see Larmour getting on the board and all that and a few tries, but there was very little offered by that Italy. Granted, somewhat of a second string Italy team.
You say second string, there was a lot made of that. There's a few players missing.
Yeah.
And I feel like, first of all,
I don't think so.
If for Carlo Canna to be their second string 10, I think is curious, because I actually think. Well, I guess
you've always preferred him.
I've preferred him for Italy because I think he's better running
Tommaso.
a game. Yes, indeed.
Sorry, Tommy.
I think that Carlo Canna is better for Italy having a chance to win games, and perhaps slightly worse for Italy having a chance to score tries. But curiously, that's where Conor O'Shea's head's at, and that's where Conor O'Shea's head's been at for the last couple of years. Is getting this Italy team from being something that was stale and was not moving to being something that can attack. He's doing what he basically the Harlequins model of coaching that he had is more or less moved in. They're young, they're plucky, they attack. It works, but
there's a lot more to be said for it. Like if you're asking a fan to come and pay money, and in a country like Italy where they're mad into their football, and there's no reason for them not to be, like Juventus look very dangerous, all this kind of stuff. There's a lot to watch football wise. If you're asking them to come and watch rugby, don't be dragging the game down into the dirges so you can maybe keep the score to 10-point deficit when they lose. As opposed to that, pick some young exciting backs who are going to make mistakes and invariably do, and positioning sometimes suffers, but they have a few gems players. Negri, who I now see there, like Negri's one of my favourite players to break out from there in the last few years, especially with Parise kind of coming to the end of his reign.
Very much so.
To see a player of his calibre and quality, and like some of the stats that he gets through, he does a lot of work. He actually reminds me a little like when you watch some vintage Jamie Heaslip performances and you don't actually see him do the spectacular work, and you invariably read comments after the game dismissing his performance, but when you look back, it was like he hit that guy, got up from the tackle, made the next tackle as well, and there's like in contesting at the ruck became a 6-7 second ruck. He does all that kind of stuff, just gets his hands in everywhere, and is in very, very physical either side of the ball. So like Negri's a very important cog for them, and they do have some talented folks in that team. So basically the big guys they brought back in are
Tommaso Allen for Canna, Benvenuti on the wing, who's obviously a good player, and Negri as well, what they're going to look to do, I think, is build on that model. They're going to look at that Fiji Japan model. They're going to look at running them around the corner. Huge for them is going to be the offensive breakdown. What they do with the ball, can they make it quick? And that's the key to derailing Georgia, is to get that offensive breakdown going. Charge first phase. Down the angle of the centres. Centres chop them down, then the ball has to be quick, and then it has to be moved, and you move them from side to side.
There's
and the Georgians can't
scope
cope.
for hubris, because it caught Wales out even last year. It was like there's a bit of hubris when you think we don't have to rush here, and it's like, oh, they reckon they're good scrummagers. We can match them at scrum time.
That's a terrible call.
That kind of stuff, and you can see it happen with senior teams as well, where they just dismiss it, and that tends to be when the first half is oddly paced. Like Georgian pacing produces different looks to games than even the top couture's, which we accuse of being slow. Like it's a different kind of slow. It's a more methodical plodding. When they're getting their way and they're stamping the influence over the game, it looks very different from other rugby games, which I really enjoy, even though it's not as flashy and spectacular.
There does need to be a sense of urgency about Italy, in the sense that they don't want the game to be dragged to a halt. They don't want loads of scrums.
They want quick penalties.
If the game is 0-0 after 20-30 minutes, that's A1 positioning for Georgia to go and steal the game, and now Georgia will be so content with doing that, and Italy will start to get panicked and frustrated. It's not a position they're in.
Patience is like, I would put that on the Georgian side. I've seen fewer international seeds, or like very few international teams that have more patience than this Georgia team.
True.
Even when things are going badly, you'd accuse them of being too patient, because they're unwilling to spread it a lot of the time, but they are very deliberate about their processes and about what they do with the ball.
So exactly. And for Georgia, what you're thinking is, hold that ball early doors, get a lot of it, slow the pace down, win those contacts, suck in the Italian defence, and then they have added to their game in recent years that ability to strike out wide, particularly off chaos ball. They do have some decent players. Your man Mattiashvili, I know they don't have their usual fullback on, but the lad Mattiashvili I really like. I think he's a good player,
and their captain at 13, what is his name?
No, he's not around. He's not around. No, he's gone. I think he's retired.
Okay.
They do have the very good 12, who's playing 13 this week. He used to be their 12. Whose name I shouldn't really attempt. Sharakadze.
I'm going to apologise in advance for both the Italian but particularly the Georgian names. We really can't
The spellings are all
them.
kind of made up anyway, because it's not even the cursive is different over there.
Yes,
it's like it's a totally different language.
Yeah.
It comes from a totally different base. Give us a break.
Yeah, but we do like a lot of their players. Like that fullback. Yeah, it's just good to see a bit of development in those key positions, because the number 9, who's Labanidze, who's been at it for the last few years, he's still very young, but he's a very talented player, and he reads the game really well. He's a good little petit general, which is what you want at 9.
Yes.
But what they added with having just a 15 who's capable of making passes and sitting a bit deep and putting people into space
of a top class 10.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And for 10-man rugby, that's really, like, for the next step in their evolution, you'd love to see a proper footballer at 10 for them. It would bring them on leaps and bounds. But for the lack of that, they can bring, like, their backs are all very physical, and they do run lines, so it's a matter of using the pitch, which they didn't always.
Getting better at offloading, even in the tight, getting better at offloading, and just generating that bit of momentum. And they can get stuck and then unstick themselves with some offloads, which is obviously what they're hoping to see.
Indeed, yeah.
And then obviously the 2 unseen weapons, which will be at the line out, will be crucial. It'll be interesting to see if Negri or one of the Italians is going to step up and disrupt their line out ball, because that's the best way to disrupt their ball. Is to get at that line out ball, because the last thing Italy want is early flowy attacking rugby up to halfway line, trying to exit with ball in hand. Things are looking good, then an Italian knock on, then scrum, then penalty Georgia,
feed on that kind of mistake,
kick to the corner, then win the line out, maul over.
The crowd all goes
try. The crowd's going The crowd doesn't like it, but I mean those are the kind of like that's why a knock on for Italy in their own half could be killer for them. It could be conceded,
and that's very plausible, because they are very prone to an old knock on.
So that's
in their
why
half.
I think, and this is why I would have preferred to see Kana at 10, is that I think that the way to deal with Georgia, especially early doors, is actually to kick it in behind them, to plug those corners, to make them exit, and then I'd
test their cover in the backfield.
Backfield, and then make them exit. Give them lineouts on their own 5-meter line under pressure. Make them their game plan is going to be to hold the ball, but they're not going to be too comfortable holding it back there. They're prone to the odd knock on themselves. So are you going to see the Georgians trying to exit? They'll probably lean on the young lad Labanidze, but then he's going to give Italy the ball probably inside the Georgia half.
Yeah, he's just not that physical a player to be bombing box kicks.
So that is the tactic for Italy for me. And like the selection of Tommy Allen, obviously you got Campagnaro in there in the centre. It looks like they're going out to attack them through the middle with quick ball, which could work. But I would
it's a big ask. I'm wondering how the breakdown's going to be called, because they both have kind of different styles of rucking as well. I actually think the Georgian style of rucking is less susceptible to more recent ref interpretations, because they tend to flood the breakdown with multiple heads and do it very slowly, so there's no sense of danger in it, and they're just kind of very quick to secure their ball. Italy, I fear, could be flying in, but I don't foresee a lot of those decisions getting given.
If the ref was studying the Italy game last week against Ireland, Italy were, I think, good for a penalty call most rucks on the defensive breakdown. When Ireland had the ball, they were trying. I know Ireland, they're a much better team than Italy, but when Ireland had the ball, Italy were just trying to slow it up every time, and it was illegal and it was blatant, and it should have been called even more than it was.
Yeah, Nigel Owens is quite flowy though. He
is quite flowy. I think he did a good job.
Yeah,
but I think Italy, that's one of the cautious things for Italy to really be concerned.
They're going to be desperate to do it, because if Georgia get time holding the ball, they'll invariably try and get stuck in. But I'll be curious to see some of the early calls at breakdown time from the ref, just where the marker is laid down.
How many scrums we get matters tremendously. And first of all, Italy could be in this headspace, and certainly listening to the bullish Conor O'Shea talk in weeks gone by, it seems like he really fancies Italy as a better team than Georgia, and it might just be they think their weapon's the scrum, we're going to stop them at the scrum, we're going to run at them. I think. But I think first of all, the interesting aspect is that intangible is that it's a game with more pressure on it than either of these teams have had to face.
Are usually facing, and there's a consequential game,
because it's not like the usual for both of these teams. Georgia get a game against Wales, and it's all we can be the underdogs and do it, and that's basically every game for Italy in the Six Nations. Italy don't play enough games,
and even in the World Cup, neither team has managed to make it out of the group stage to get to feel knockout rugby.
No,
so this is them, close to it. Yeah, it's a final.
Are guys going to lose their heads? Are they going to be penalties? But what I'm suspecting is that Georgians know well what Italy are going to try and bring, and the Georgians, especially in the early periods, are going to be physical. So I really don't rate the idea of taking them on in the scrum, of running at them. I think kick it over their heads and frustrate them and make them exit, and then make them make mistakes, and then kick penalties and put them under pressure. But I think
you want to build a lead against them anyway, and make them try and get expansive.
For sure. But if Conor O'Shea thinks he's going to come in and blitz them with his fast attacking players, it could work. They're very good, but it could also backfire. And then the Georgians obviously will get ahead of steam up if they're winning scrums, if they're forcing knock-ons in the tackle, and then they might get a lead, and then the pressure on Italy if Georgia get a lead is going to like,
how do they deal? I don't know. Captain Campagnaro to the rescue, maybe? I don't know.
Captain Campagnaro threw a horrid intercept off his left last week.
He threw it off his left, off the chest of his neighbouring man, and then it floated into Larmer's hands.
It was a wild fling of a thing.
Yeah, it was a little, so I don't know. But he did pick a lovely intercept though, and that was true too.
Yes, he read that same play that Ireland always do,
stock play from years and yesteryear. But I'm just curious. I don't know. One thing I've said to you off mic before is I don't like the fact that this is the first game that Georgia are playing in this window, just in terms of cobwebs and in terms of ring rust and that kind of stuff, as well, added to that pressure that you're describing, which invariably will be a part of it. Even the shellacking that Italy took in Soldier Field last week, just to get a hit out kind of together and have an extra few weeks. I don't know. I'm curious to see which team steps up in the big moments, those kind of the intangible ones where it's either side of half time, after the early exchanges, which team kind of stamps themselves as the more level-headed, the more kind of controlling influence on the game.
Who's going to make more plays? Obviously both teams are going to be up for this. Obviously both teams are going to be focused, but there are key moments. So one side has a line out 5 metres out. Who's going to make the play?
Is it repelled, or is it going softly over?
Are there going to be cheap knock-ons, or is there going to be focused kind of precision? Italy, are they going to make their tackles? They didn't last week. And the Georgians are huge, and physical in the contact, not huge in a South African way where they can be.
What is the name of the number 7? We have to cite this
7.
Because we mentioned this before.
You can read it if you'd like. It's the open side flank is,
because he's just impressed before. Just speaking on that point in the contact, because he looks like something like a rugby player come judo practitioner, just the way he tackles people high, and then there's a second movement. He keeps them on the he hits them in the air and then flips them. I think maybe is it?
Because I'm looking at it. I've actually looked.
I think
it
is.
He's the only lad in the pack who doesn't seem to have a professional contract with the French club. So it's interesting.
But no, I remember we noticed him the last time we watched him play. I think it was actually the Wales game when we watched him play. It was super impressive. Just his managing of the contact. He hit someone on the defence more often than not, keep them in the air, and then kind of ragdoll them to the floor with literally like a judo throw. So these boys do relish in the contact. That's kind of what the game's all about over there. It's amazing tradition they have of obviously Lelos and stuff, and they're all about scrummaging, all about in the tight, the physical exchanges.
The huge thing about them for big men is that they're also not easily put down. If Italy go high, or if Italy go soft in the tackle, they're not going to just go down,
try and get a cheeky rip. They won't get it.
Just their leg drive on those boys, and the wrestling background as well. They fight for every yard. They love a good slow game where it's a slow carry into contact that shouldn't be anything. Similar to Ireland in that way.
No, that's what I mean. There are parallels
through the contact, and they're very good at doing that.
The criticism mainly of them is just there's a lack of an incisive clinical edge when because what they create is comparable to some of the ruck ball that the tier 1 teams create, what they're creating against these tier 2 teams in terms of their dominance up front. It's very often what blitzkriegs teams in teams when you're looking at a tier 1 against a tier 2, they have that kind of forward superiority, but such is their style of play, and also such are their limitations out in the back line, that they don't express any urgency to grab tries with it. They're actually more content to kill the clock with it.
Yes,
and it's an monster. Even more so, it is very unique, and that's why I think it should be nurtured. And it's it would be a welcome addition to the Six Nations, just purely on that, on a stylistic point of view.
Catch teams out. It could catch teams out. It's one of those things. Ireland actually last week against the Italians displayed great patience in the first half and just discipline, when Italy were basically doing that Georgian plan, in the sense that they were a bit more expansive, but basically after Ireland blitzed them with the early try, they were just thinking for 20 minutes they were just holding the ball, and they were quite disciplined. Italy, they weren't giving opportunities opportunities to steal it, and Ireland didn't give penalties away, maintained maturity, and ended up, finally when they got the ball cutting through and opening up. But you've seen tier 1 teams with a little less maturity than Ireland get absolutely flustered by that. And that's what Georgia, I think, will bring even more so if they are in the Six Nations. I think they will bring that chaos. But this is very much a game for it, and I think I like that there's a game for it. I think if Georgia win and they ignore them, or at least if you don't read the headline, if Georgia win, if you don't read the headline next week that there's an official application made to join the Six Nations and it's being considered by the governing body, then I think it's a joke, because I think I think this should be a game for it. I think they've earned that. But I mean, we'll see what happens. Obviously, the game is to come first. Well, by the way, just the lad you were talking about.
That is definitely him. Kolilashvili?
Kolilashvili was the lad you were talking about from the Wales game last year, the crazy judo guy who's actually still contracted with Claremont.
There you go.
Not playing with them at the moment, but he's a Claremont player.
Interesting. And, he's not playing tomorrow, or
not playing tomorrow. He might be injured or something. I don't know.
I say tomorrow, but as we're filming this, it's Thursday evening into.
It's tomorrow as the people are watching.
So I'm excited for this game. I actually am. Just stylistically, I feel like it's interesting, because even Italy used to be formerly known as a scrummaging force, but no one's a scrummaging force when you're up against Georgia, to be honest. You try and shift the focus away from that if at all possible. But very often in slightly inaccurate games, the scrum becomes a focal point, and in pressure games they become slightly inaccurate, and this is very much a pressure game for both, so there's a chance it becomes inaccurate as far as handling is concerned, as far as the pace is concerned, and that all suits Georgia. Intangible is we're in Florence, we're not in fucking Tbilisi. We're actually there are going to be, I think there's going to be a pretty big crowd at this, because I think Italian rugby fans recognise that significance anyway. They're probably feeling that heat, because it's like, I know Conor Shea's been passing comment on it more often than not, and you're right in saying he's been a little bullish, more so than he usually is. He's very kind of magnanimous, but he kind of has to be. He's in a position where he's defending Italy's.
My critique of him, I've seen bad actors on both sides of this conversation, in the sense that my critique of what he was saying was that he was saying talks of Georgia entering the Six Nations are nonsense and shouldn't be considered. And then I've seen on the other side bullish Georgian advocates saying, like, it was after the Italy game, I saw a couple of tweets from a couple of tier 2 accounts who were well behind tier 2 rugby, saying, look, Italy are an embarrassment, get them out of the Six Nations and get Georgia in. And I'm like, guys, the solution isn't ring fencing with one side outside and one side inside. That's not the solution. That doesn't do good for anybody. If you want to grow the game, you have to give opportunities for everybody and have it be a meritocracy. And that's the issue. That's the issue with what Conor O'Shea says, is like, Georgia aren't your enemy. Like, they're your enemy in the context of this game, but Georgia being in the Six Nations doesn't need to come at the expense of you, and you don't need to take a dump on their chances and their aspirations to make that point. And that's kind of what he did. But that was my only critique of him. In the meantime, I started being bullish about this game and getting behind his team and thinking that he's better.
That's what I think that's him. I
think that's a good attitude, except if it bleeds into his tactics and they're too naive and they try and shut Georgia down early doors. Now, it may actually happen that way, because Georgia could get caught cold. It is their first game. Italy do have some very good players, but if it backfires on them, then they could be in a world of trouble. And I'm very much like you. I mean, like, we're not mad into predictions here. Sometimes Shane gets a little mystic Mac on us, but like this game could take many shapes. It's a close game. It's between two good and very interesting sides. It's got a lot of money on it, and I'm really looking forward to it. And if you're wondering why we're leading with it, this has implications beyond November that are huge for both teams. It's going to be massive. Watch it. If you're a rugby fan, if you're from New Zealand, if you're from Australia, I don't care where you're from, give this game a watch. Take the time out of your day to watch some tier 2 rugby and just engage.
If we're all framing this podcast in the context of the next World Cup, and this is seismic, but it's also in that context, but it also stretches further, because it's like, where is rugby going in the next few decades? And like, Georgia are going nowhere. As we said at the top of this, is like they're one of the few countries for which rugby is actually their national sport. Like, they love it, live and breathe it. And yes, they're not going to bring as much money and bank in with it, but they are going to bring as a style of play, and like the top tours has recognised it. The immense props have been busted up.
First of all, personnel wise, there's a huge like player base there that can be just exploited and gathered, which is already happening. But then broad speak, like, you can look at, well, they're not going to bring in any money themselves, but broadly what you're trying to do is make this game global and make this game more recognisable, and the more top quality nations and sides who care about the game, who want to nurture the game, that you bring into the main fold, the better it's going to be long term. And that's what you need to think. You need to think long term. Where's this game going to be in 20 years? Where's the game going to be in 50 years? Where's the game going to be in 100 years, you know, when the whole world's underwater?
It's very nice to think that way, but
no, it is, but
quarterly benefits.
This is you know, that bleeds into a critique of World Rugby that I'm not going to go into.
Yes,
but certainly this game is good.
This game has, and it's literally it's the most consequential game that's actually happening this weekend. Whatever you may think about England and the All Blacks, which is a mighty test as well, but it like a year out from a World Cup. These teams have aspirations, sights set on winning the World Cup. Both of them do, which leaves this fixture a little bit like lacking for consequence, because it's still with the context of that World Cup. It's all we'll find out next year. So you know.
And speaking of games with just a little bit.